friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheatley, back again for another episode of History Comics Podcast, this time with the life of Julie Schwartz. One of the most significant editors of DC was Julie Schwartz, who got his start as one of the first literary agents of science fiction writers, joined by friends and future comic book greats Mort Weisinger and Otto Binder. Schwartz would guide many of DC's key titles through the Silver Age of the 1980s, employing some of the best talent to craft the DC universe. He was an example of a truly great comic book editor, showing how to guide talents in comics for the better. Julie Schwartz's parents were born Joseph and Bertha Schwartz, who were of Jewish descent and immigrated from a small town outside of Bucharest, Romania, to New York City, and to mainly the neighborhood the Bronx. Julie Schwartz was born on June 19, 1915, at 817 Caldwell Avenue. His parents enrolled him into PS5, Public School 5, for kindergarten, but was held back for being late to his own graduation. Schwartz would later be placed in PS45 for junior high school. As a high school senior at Theodore Roosevelt High School, Schwartz edited the school paper, The Square Deal, and had a column, Just a Moment, where Schwartz learned how to copyright and proofread under Norman Cousins, who went on to work at the Saturday Morning Review. Despite being originally held back in kindergarten, Schwartz managed to graduate at the age of 17 in 1932 by skipping 2 semesters. Growing up, Schwartz loved the library. He called himself a library kid, and especially loved reading fantasy and science fiction like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, along with being a huge Yankees fan. One story Schwartz loved was The Runaway Skyscraper by Murray Linda. Schwartz also loved pulps and called March 5th, 1926 the most important day in science fiction history, as that was when the Amazing Stories magazine premiered. While featuring mostly reprints of H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, and Edgar Allan Poe, it also was edited by Hugo Gernsback, for which the prestigious science fiction awards, the Hugos, are named after. One day, Schwartz read about a science fiction club called the Scienceers, run by Mortimer Weisinger, but it stated that you couldn't join until you were 16. However, the night that Schwartz finally could, he discovered that the club had been disbanded because Weisinger had spent all the money on pulp magazines. Schwartz arrived to witness a bunch of angry kids storming out of the clubhouse. Undeterred, Julie Schwartz and Mort Weisinger became fast friends, both loving the work of science fiction writers like David H. Keller, M.D., whose M.D. was legitimate from his neuropsychology degree from the University of Pennsylvania, and was then the most popular science fiction writer at the time. Together, Schwartz and Weisinger, along with Forrest J. Ackerman, decided to share their ideas about science fiction stories with others, launching one of the earliest science fiction fanzines with The Time Traveler, managing to convince the rest of the Scienceers to get back together to do so, basing on their original club bulletin, The Planet. Mort Weisinger was listed as the managing editor, while Julie Schwartz was associate editor. The Time Traveler was 6 pages and launched on January 9th, 1932 with the subtitle Science Fiction's Only Fan Magazine. It included a biography of Captain S.P. Meek, an American military chemist and science fiction writer, an interview with Bob Olson, a science fiction writer who would mentor a young Ray Bradbury, and the first installment of the History of Science Fiction by Mort Weisinger, along with a list of science fiction films and so forth. It sold for 10 cents and soon became nationally distributed fanzine with 30 subscriptions selling for $1 a year. Of note, one of the fanzine's first subscribers were Jerome Siegel from Cleveland, Ohio, who would later produce his own fanzine, Science Fiction, in January of 1933, with a story he wrote under the pen name Herbert S. Fine called The Reign of Superman. While the Superman in this was a villain, Jerry Siegel would later adapt the concept with artist Joe Shuster to create Superman. Thus, as Julie Schwartz would argue, he and Mort Weisinger was having a hand in Superman's creation even then. The Time Traveler also hosted a round-robin of 18-part serial, Cosmos, which featured different writers doing each chapter, notably ones being Otto Binder, David H. Keller, and Edmund Hamilton, which Schwartz called one of the most exciting parts of the fanzine. By the summer of 1934, Julie Schwartz, Mort Weisinger, and their friend and future comic book writer, Otto Binder, were hit by a car in Palisades Park while hiking, sitting all 3 to the hospital. Thankfully, they fully recovered, and Schwartz would often ponder what would have happened to science fiction and comic books if they hadn't. It would not have been good, in my opinion. Shortly after this, Weisinger decided to focus on becoming a writer and editor, having come up with an idea since they were familiar with many of the science fiction writers, along with the editors of various pulp magazines. Forming Solar Sail Service in 1934, Weisinger and Schwartz would use their connections with writers to hook them with publishers, essentially becoming their agents, along with launching their careers as science fiction professionals. Weisinger figured out that writers just wrote whatever story came to mind and submitted them, hoping that the editors of these pulp magazines would find a place for them. Instead, if someone was to ask the editors what stories they needed at the time and then inform the writers, it would work much more efficiently, while they would receive a 10% on American sales commission along with 15% of English ones. Their first submission was Edmund Hamilton's 7,000-word story, The Master of Genes, which they sold to Wonder Stories for $35. Soon, Julie Schwartz became Stanley G. Weinbaum's agent, who would later die of throat cancer at the too young age of 33, but not before crafting the classic A Martian Odyssey in 1934. Weisinger would later go on to become the editor of Thrilling Wonder Stories, after recommending himself for the job, and the Standard Magazine, where he would change stories and titles, which he became notorious for. Schwartz, meanwhile, continued to work as a literary agent, getting no less than H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness sold to Astounding Stories for $350, which would be Lovecraft's largest paycheck. Schwartz would also represent such notable science fiction authors as Lee Brackett, who co-wrote my favorite film, Empire Strikes Back, Robert Heinlein, Starship Troopers, and Robert Bloch, Psycho. Later in his career, Schwartz would have Bloch write the introduction to Gotham by Gaslight, a 1989 Batman Elseworlds miniseries that had the Dark Knight take on Jack the Ripper. Bloch did it for $500, and Schwartz picked him due to Bloch having previously written the Yours Truly Jack the Ripper, which Schwartz sold to Word Tales in 1943 for $80. Of note, another of Schwartz's clients, writer Lee Sprague de Camp, got him on Chesterfield cigarettes, which Schwartz got hooked on for 30 years, and constantly berated him for it. Julie Schwartz would also help organize the first WorldCon in 1939, which had only 200 attendees starting out. It had since become one of the most significant conventions in the world, with a recent attendance of 10,000, and most noted for hosting the prestigious Hugo Awards for Achievement in Science Fiction. Despite this event, Schwartz also had the time to witness Lou Gehrig's farewell speech at Yankee Stadium, balancing his science fiction and Yankee fandom. Later, Schwartz took on a young Ray Bradbury as a client, selling The Pendulum Story to Super Science Stories for $27.50, appearing in November of 1941, though actually published on August of 22nd, just on Bradbury's 21st birthday. Schwartz would go on to sell Bradbury's first 70 stories, but would then have to stop being his agent, as Schwartz was about to move into comic books. This came about when one of Julie Schwartz's clients, Alfred Bester, suggested, or as Schwartz put it, insisted, he applied to be assistant editor to Sheldon Mayer at All American Comics, where he had taken over the Green Lantern stories. Schwartz would start on February 23, 1944, as Bester had already set up an interview for him 2 days earlier. To prepare, Schwartz bought 3 issues of All American Comics at a dime apiece, where he later called the best investment of his career. Bester was highly respected in the industry, with no less than writer Harlan Ellison stating he would rather have a blurb by Bester on one of his books than $1 million contract. This, of course, led to the end of Solar Services, as Julie Schwartz had moved from literary agent to comic book editor, along with his friend Mort Weisinger. Soon, Julie Schwartz started working more and more with comic books and would witness the creation of Batman by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, and would later affirm how much Finger had to help in creating the Dark Knight starting out. While in comics, Julie Schwartz worked with Max Gaines, the future founder of EC Comics, who formed the Big American Comic Book, which was 132 pages with 15 stories. To fill it, Julie Schwartz wrote a few, including a Johnny Thunder story, which got him $250 a paycheck, 4 times his regular weekly salary, as Gaines decided to pay everyone up front instead of waiting for the royalties. However, Schwartz would later learn that Big American sold so well that their royalty check would likely have been much bigger. During this time, Schwartz would avoided being drafted in World War II, as he was declared 4F due to his poor eyesight. Soon he had plenty of work with All American Comics, the home of the JSA and Wonder Woman, and National Comics, home of Batman and Superman, when they formally merged and would become the basis of what we now know as DC Comics. It was set up at 480 Lexington Avenue, and soon Schwartz was writing the Green Lantern as part of the new company. Schwartz did get some of his past clients' work as well, such as getting Robert Bloch to script The Flash Comics number 66 in August-September 1945, with the story The Flash and the Black Widow. Schwartz would soon be joined by his friend Otto Binder, whom after Fawcett Publishing went defunct due to DC suing over the Captain Marvel being too close to Superman, Binder ended up going to DC where he worked on Superman, the very character he and Fawcett were accused of ripping off, and inadvertently helped expand the Superman universe, creating the original Supergirl and Krypto the Superdog. Julie Schwartz enjoyed his work as a comic book editor, especially on series like Strange Adventures and Mystery in Space, which appealed to his love of science fiction. On these series, he had a young Frank Frazetta work on Mystery in Space on a story by Gardner Fox called Spores in Space. Schwartz also oversaw launching a new series in March 1956, Showcase, which was designed to showcase new stories and characters. The first 3 issues bombed, but Showcase number 4, Schwartz decided to revive the Golden Age Flash character, this time with Barry Allen as his alter ego, which Schwartz tasked writer Robert Kanigher and artist Carmen Infantino to create. Schwartz thought that comic book fan bases changed every 20 years, thus no one would notice that the Flash was no longer Jay Garritt. While Showcase number 4 was successful and was considered the official launch of Silver comic books, Schwartz would be mistaken on the fans forgetting Jay Garritt was the original Flash. This new Flash would be successful, though, resulting in the old series being relaunched with issue number 104 over restarting at issue number 1 at the insistence of DC head Erwin Donenfeld. But this, of course, once again created confusion with fans as they're going like, wait, what happened to Jay Garritt? But that will be addressed a little bit later. Soon, more DC heroes were created and revived for the Silver Age, such as the Atom, whom Schwartz based his civilian name on his friend Raymond A. Palmer. Other DC heroes that were revived were the Green Lantern, Justice League of America, and Hawkman. Schwartz himself co-created Adam Strange with artist Murphy Anderson in Showcase number 17, November of 1958, about a human transported to an alien planet Ron, where he gets caught up in the Civil War while falling in love with Alana. An ode to the classic John Carter stories by Edgar Rice Burroughs, Schwartz would later resign writer Gardner Fox to write the stories in Strange Adventures. Julie Schwartz next would work with writer John Broome and artist Gil Kane on the Green Lantern's revival during the Silver Age, with Kane modeling Hal Jordan's look on his famous neighbor Paul Newman, appearing in Showcase number 22 in October of 1959. Then, Julie Schwartz edited the classic Flash number 123 on September of 1961, in which Barry Allen, the Flash, met the Jay Garritt Flash in the story Flash of Two Worlds, inspired by the team-ups of heroes that originated in the pulps. It was also the result of DC realizing they needed to explain to fans why Barry Allen was the Flash now and not Jay Garritt. Thus, Schwartz tasked Jay Garritt, the Flash's creator, Gardner Fox, with coming up with a way for them to meet. Fox created the multiverse with Schwartz's help, explaining that Barry Allen's Flash, Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, and the rest of the current Silver Age DC heroes were part of Earth 1, while the Jay Garritt Flash, Alan Scott Green Lantern, and the Justice Society of America, along with all the other Golden Age superheroes, were a part of the separate dimension called Earth 2. Fox even inserted himself as a comic book writer who dreamed of Earth 2 and used these to write stories. Thus, the Jay Garritt Flash and other Earth 2 characters were comic book characters in Earth 1. It was an ideal solution, as the multiverse explained why Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman in Earth 1 didn't remember Jay Garritt or Alan Scott, as the versions of Earth 2 did, and it worked well for a while. In addition, Schwartz revealed the Earth we are living in is called Earth Prime. This would set off a series of crossovers in the multiverse, with the high point Schwartz considered Crisis on Earth 1 and Justice League number 21 and 22, where the Justice League met the original Golden Age team, the Justice Society of America. Next, Julie Schwartz helped revive Wonder Woman by having a different member of the Justice League guest star in her comic book. That team first appeared in Brave and the Bold number 28 on February-March of 1960, working with writer Gardner Fox and artist Mike Sudelsky, updating the Golden Age Justice Society of America with a new lineup of Green Lantern, The Flash, Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman. Batman and Superman were scheduled to join at a later date, but Schwartz ran into some trouble with their editors, Jack Schiff and Mort Weisinger, respectively, who objected over fears of their characters being overexposed. That quickly changed when Justice League sales slipped, a common problem that keeps repeating itself, leading to Batman and Superman being quickly added to the team roster. All this work led to Julie Schwartz to receive the Alley Award for Best Editor in 1962. Of a fun personal note, Julie Schwartz's wife, Jean Ordwin, once dated artist Joe Kubert, something that Kubert liked to tease Schwartz about. Originally his secretary, they married in 1952 and remained so to her death in 1986. Schwartz brought Kubrick and Gardner Fox back to revive Hawkman for the Silver Age, calling Kubert one of the best war artists in comic books, while Fox was one of the comic book's most reliable writers. Schwartz did have conflict with artists, notably Alex Toff, who wanted to do Johnny Thunder and Strange Adventures, but wasn't allowed to, resulting in Toff refusing to work with Schwartz directly at DC for some time. Schwartz would go on